Embracing the ecosystem way, these gatherings will provide a space and time for leaders to share common challenges, ideas, and resources. Conversations will revolve around successful models and new ideas to support STEM learning experiences during and beyond this time of social distancing. My name is Jeremy Shore, and I'm excited to be here with you today as we explore an exciting new tool for learning in these times and beyond. LabXChange is a powerful platform allowing parents, teachers, and students to customize science learning, taking it to new heights. So, given the pandemic, how can parents, how can teachers offer meaningful science education to their students and children? A really, really good answer is LabXChange, a Harvard initiative funded by the Amgen Foundation, and it's offering the best of digital science education available free through a flexible, interactive online platform that promotes teaching, community, and collaboration. We have with us two of the folks from LabXChange, and I'm really excited to introduce them to you and to learn more from them today. First, Gar Vazirani is the managing director for LabXChange. In his previous life, he was trained as a philosopher at Yale, focusing on the philosophy of law and ethics. He founded and serves as the executive director for Wireless Philosophy, which makes access to philosophy content freely available to anyone in the world. So, am I back? Oh, I think I'm back. Sorry, folks, lost my microphone there for a second. Garv, you know, one of the things that we think about a lot in the STEM ecosystems is making sure that we're really focusing on the voices of everyone, of our entire communities. So we were talking before, and you were telling me about a recent trip you made to South Africa that I think was kind of along those lines of making sure that all voices in the world are heard and accounted for. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so nice to meet you, everybody. I'm glad I was able to do something like this. It's such an exciting community to be a part of. So with those nicety aside, let me tell you a little about Cape Town. LabXChange team works with people all over the world to make our content available, both our platform, but also the interactives and simulations that we'll get into later on. And Cape Town is one of the main hubs where we do our research and we do our work in building out content out there. But another reason we're really interested in Cape Town, one of the reasons I was there this time around, was because it's really important for science education in particular, and the global challenges we face, that as many people in the world contribute to what the solutions look like. And I think it's something like 42% of the global youth are going to be in Africa by 2030. And so we know that the answer is going to have to involve everybody, especially people from that continent. And that's one of the main reasons I spend a lot of time in Cape Town, and so does Rob.
That's I think that it's a thing that we're always thinking about, and it's rare that I think we all get the opportunity to actually move that far out of our normal boundaries to really have the opportunity to think about how our work can impact people from everywhere. We also have with us Dr. Robert Liu. Dr. Robert Liu is the faculty director and the principal investigator of LabXChange, which builds on his long-standing commitment to interdisciplinary teaching and research. A professor of molecular and cellular biology at Harvard University and the UNESCO Chair on Life Sciences and Social Innovation, he also leads the Derek Bach Center for Teaching and Learning and Harvard Ed Portal, and he founded HarvardX. Robert earned his PhD from Harvard, and since 1988 has taught undergraduate courses and worked extensively in science outreach. Rob, we're spending a lot of time right now, all of us, or many of us, with kids at home or schools that we're working with who are trying to teach and learn under these new paradigms, these virtual classes that we're not prepared for. And I see a lot of teachers trying to do everything they can, but I also see a lot of kids just sort of consuming video content. I'm wondering what you can tell us about your thoughts on learning by thinking versus learning by doing.
Right. Thank you, Jeremy, and thanks for having us. And hello, everyone. I think what it really comes down to is the realization that learning requires work, and learning requires a level of engagement that unfortunately we often don't associate with the internet the way we could. And so I still remember when I was a junior faculty member and I was I'm teaching in my second round doing the big introductory biology course at Harvard. I remember that we had a sort of a situation where Students were really enjoying the course. The last set of lectures had gone really well, but then the midterm exam came and they tanked. They tanked on a topic that we all felt they understood. And I remember sitting down with the team of teaching fellows and trying to figure out from section, did you see anything that revealed why this might be? And after a lot of back and forth, a brave teaching fellow raised her hand and she said to me, Rob, I think the problem is that you're too clear. And I have to say, as someone who at that point in my life was obsessed with simply being clear, I was like, what do you mean I'm too clear? Am I supposed to be confusing? But what it really led to, and in fact, and she and I are close colleagues and friends now, was she had stumbled upon a principle in teaching and learning called the illusion of knowing, where if you simply passively listen to something or look at something, and it all makes sense, it all hangs together very logically, you actually think you know it, you think you understand it, but if you don't actually do anything to engage with the material and to sort of reflect back to yourself, your understanding, you may not actually learn it at all, and you may not understand it at all. And so that was a very important sort of formative experience for me. And so if we look at LabXChange, one of the things we've tried to do is to create a platform that's not simply about broadcast. It's a platform that both shares material, but also gives you the opportunity to drive engagement in a variety of different ways. So Jeremy, if you don't mind, maybe I'll show what the platform is and give folks a sense of what
I think that'd be really great. Before you start, Rob, I just want to tell those of you who are listening and watching that there's going to be an opportunity throughout this entire hour for you to ask questions of Rob and Garv. So make sure that if you have questions, you put those in the chat box. And we're going to start off with this demo, but we're going to pretty quickly delve into the specifics that you have so we can all figure out how to apply. So yeah, with that, Rob, I'd love to take a look.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is LabXChange, and there are really two major domains that we can talk about. There's what the platform really allows you to do, and there's a particular set of content that LabXChange has built that focuses on the teaching of the scientific process. So maybe what I'll really focus on, though, initially is the platform itself, and then I'm sure in the question and answer period, or if you want to interrupt, please do, we can start to unpack what some of the other functionalities are. But the really important thing is that we wanted to try to democratize the capacities that have traditionally only been available to folks that build massive open online courses. We took everything that we designed for HarvardX, for edX, and what we've done is we've unlocked all of that as a functionality for anyone in the world to really use for free. So that when you register on LabXChange, you define yourself as an educator or a learner, but it actually doesn't matter, because no matter how you define yourself, you actually have both dashboards, both functionalities, both as an educator and as a learner, right? But the exciting thing about being an educator is that, of course, you have the ability to search our library. And the principle here was to not have a library of courses, but in fact, to take the critical components of courses, it might be a video, it might be a piece of text, and allow you to put them together in unique ways that allow you to tell your story. So for LabXChange, one of the critical units of learning that we really believe in is really what's called a pathway. And the principle of a pathway is that this is a series of assets. It can be text, it can be video, it can be sort of interspersed assessments like assignments. And this is an example of a pathway that LabXChange built focused on research integrity. But what I think is important to realize is that LabXChange built this, but any one of you, anybody in the world can actually build this same sort of sequence of learning objects and can set up their own learning objectives associated with it. So this really gives you the freedom to create a new sort of learning experience for your students. And then as an educator, you can in fact create a class. And once you create a class, you can actually add to that class any pathway, any single asset that you have created. So what you're seeing here is in fact my Harvard class, which I've taken entirely online, which I suspect lots of you are going through right now. I have some 80 plus students. And for each of these sort of what really would have been my lectures, I've created a LabXChange pathway. So I recorded brief sort of snippets of lecture, and then I've interspersed it with questions, with other kinds of interactives, and also with things that I've pulled directly off of the LabXChange platform. And I was able, as I normally do for any given lecture, list out all of the learning objectives. So this is an example of what anyone can do. This is something where when you're creating a class, or when you're trying to create a pathway, you name it, you choose the subject, the background knowledge. When you add content, you can search the entire growing library of LabXChange, but you can also add any content that you've loaded up to the platform yourself. So let's say, for example, I had a prompt for a student that was really focused on bats, because of course bats are very interesting right now. As you can see, you can load in all the material, you can reorder it as you see fit, you set your learning objectives, and then you can publish this straight to your class. So the important thing to keep in mind is that you have all that LabXChange has to offer. You have all of the content that you find really interesting and powerful as well. And you can create a class and share that with your students, which is exactly what I've done for my students. So I think I'll stop here to take questions, but the idea is to really give you the power to build sort of a truly interactive learning experience. And in fact, what I should have sort of reminded you of is that you can add, so you can add your own documents, images, narratives, video, text, but you can also add your own assessments. So for me, what I've done is that when I would usually prompt students in the class with questions, I then create sort of an online assessment, add the answers, I can give feedback, etc. for each answer, and then I can intersperse my videos, my short videos with something like this. So I will stop here, but this gives you a sense of what the functionalities of the platform would really allow you to do, with the notion that it's not about a lecture, it's about a sequence of different kinds of assets. So here's a narrative video, here's a question that I start them off with, here's a piece of text, here's me on video, another question, me on video again. And if you haven't seen this, because our students need a break, I've also uploaded cute things from YouTube. That's kind of a break time for them. And then I can upload all the slides and recordings from live sessions of my class as well. So very quickly, that's what the functionalities are really around. And then I can show you a variety of assets later on that we think for science are particularly powerful. But please, any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them now.
Yeah, so it appears that the system is really modular.
Yes.
I think that's accurate. Does that mean that if I create a class and I put a bunch of resources in there, that I can take pieces and parts of that particular class or LabXChange unit and use it in others? How does that work as I kind of expand and grow?
Yeah, so really the principle here is to allow us to do what all of us that teach do, right? We pull a number of things together, a variety of resources, and then as we teach, we update it, we rearrange it, depending on what class we're really teaching. And what we're trying to create is sort of a taxonomic structure that allows you to favorite and store all of your stuff, find things on LabXChange that are particularly useful, but then you can rearrange it for one class, but then you can really adopt, clone and adapt what you've made sort of before for another class. So you can generate as many classes, as many variants as you want. And also here's another thing which I've done very recently. So for example, with this lecture that we're looking at right now, there was a student that had forgotten some of the basics of fundamental genetics. So I was able to take this pathway, add in a couple more fundamental assets on genetics and share that with him alone. So that's something you can do as well, because anything you create, you can also share. And so that's something where I was able to customize for my students, for a particular student, a need or a gap that they had to fill.
So there are a few questions that I don't think we have to dig super deep into right now, kind of specifically about the technical nuts and bolts of setting up classes and all those things. But for those folks who are interested after this is all over in really digging in and really learning how to use the service, are there classes, tutorials? How does that work? How does somebody, beyond this, learn how to actually create content and build courses?
Well, so in fact, we do have quite a bit of material that helps you in that regard. So we have whole pathways on how to explore content. And here is something that's called a cluster, where we've clustered a variety of pathways to help you think about doing remote learning for your students with LabXChange. So there is a significant amount of guidance. And in fact, on our first Explore page, you will find how to get help, but also how to make a pathway, as an educator, what are the things you can do, how you can think about remote learning more in general, but this also gives you a sense of the different kinds of content, specifically in science, that we have available on LabXChange. Forgive my slow home internet, but these are some of the examples of the kinds of content that we have. So there's quite a bit of guidance on the platform as well that you can take advantage of.
So as a former 16-year school administrator, I've got to ask this question. You might not be able to super get into this, but roughly, what does this cost to access and use?
$0. So it's entirely free, and it will be free forever. We are completely committed to this. The real principle here, and also, by the way, you can access the content even without creating an account. But if you want to take a class or create a class, then you need to create an account. It's basically 2 steps and everything's free. Everything's free. So basically what we're trying to do as well is sort of take the principle of open educational resources that are very high quality and take it to a new level, right? So that your ability to reuse it and to mix it and to tell your own narrative in terms of the learning narrative you need to create for your students, you, for the first time, have the power to do that. I know that I've done things where on my course website for a given session, I'll have a whole bunch of links sending students all over the place, and then I have to stand up in class and try and help them knit that together. Now you can actually create a story for each session of your class, mixing these resources, adding your own laptop videos, as I've done, and create a complete interactive learning experience for your students.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. I mean, that's the benefit, right, of a partnership with somebody like the Amgen Foundation, who can
absolutely
make sure that these things can be available to teachers. Those of you who are listening, we're going to have a kind of a call to action at the end. But I did want to mention that we are beginning a pilot program with the folks at Harvard and LabXChange, and Veronica Gonzalez just put into the chat box a form where you can sign up for that. So make sure you take a look at that as you think through, and if you think that a pilot for your ecosystem, your school district, your organization might make a lot of sense. What about student interactions? Are there abilities for students to be interacting with each other in the platform?
Well, so there are really two modalities right now, and I can share this from my own class. If you just give me a second here, is that so for every single class that you create, you can create and structure sort of a discussion forum for it. So what I've done is, and my class has just gotten in, so folks haven't gone crazy yet, because our first assessment is in a week, is that for each lecture that I post, I create a separate thread so that any questions that come up, students can see it and I can answer in the discussion thread, and teaching fellows can answer as well. That being said, we also have profiles, right? So when a student is on LabXChange, you actually have profiles. You have to create a profile. And so if we go back here, right? So you see here are all 86 students that are in my class. Each one of them has a profile, and through your profile, you can message the instructor directly. You can message each other directly. And so that's another mode of sort of interaction. And actually, Garv, do you want to share some of the wider plans that we have moving forward? Garv, I think you're still muted.
So while Garv's figuring that out, Rob, I've got another question for you. I see all the great content that you folks at Harvard are putting in there, but I'm a science teacher. I'm not a science teacher, but I'm a science teacher. I'm teaching high school physics, and I find some great materials from you folks, but I also have kind of a specific objective that I don't find material for. Do I have the ability to upload my own content to mix in with this content?
Yes. Yes. So in other words, the way the account works is that from your dashboard, right, as you can see, this entire section is my content. So this is content that I am in the process of creating and uploading. And as you can see, some of it is video, some of it are documents like PDFs. These are all, for example, laptop videos. These are questions that I used the LabXChange platform to create. So they're highly interactive and you can store things. So you can upload basically a lot of content types for your own sort of use in terms of telling your story. Now, if there's something that is embedded in another site elsewhere, what that would really have to be is a link, right? So there are limitations in terms of we can't allow you to rip something off of a site. But for example, if anything's on YouTube and they're allowing the embedding of things, you can embed anything from YouTube that you find as well.
But
so,
if I pay access to some proprietary content, that would be a link.
Yes, exactly. That would have to be a link. And as long as your students have the mode of logging in.
And
right?
so here's a, I don't know, maybe hard question, annoying question. If everybody can upload content, mm-hmm. How do I know when I log on to LabXChange that the content I'm pulling isn't garbage?
Well, so all of the content that's searchable in the public library of LabXChange, it's all from partners, right? So there's a vetted set of things from Khan Academy. We have things from iBiology, supported by Howard Hughes, and it's growing and growing and growing. Those are the only things that are searchable. So everything is vetted and everything has a partner that's actually standing behind it. For example, like the Wellcome Genome Campus. When you create a pathway and you upload all of your own content, that's private mode. So that's not something where, let's say someone did something totally wacky in private mode. That's not something that is visible, searchable, findable in the public mode of LabXChange. So it's sort of a little bit like asking, how do we stop an instructor or a teacher from saying something really crazy in their class? Well, we can't, right? But we're not a platform for making all of that public.
So all of the flat Earth content that I'm going to upload, nobody else is going to be able to see, is what you're saying?
Yeah. Sorry, Jeremy, but I'm afraid not. You're going to have to use some other dark web platform.
Have to find a new avenue for that. All right. So can you talk a little bit more, and then I'd like to try to go back to Garv to talk about those platform changes, so we can try you again in a second, Garv. But can you talk a little bit more about those partners? So again, I'm putting on my curriculum hat from those days. How do I know that the content that my students are accessing is content that's going to lead to mastery? What's that vetting process look like? Who are your partners? Right.
So we've really focused on partners that are, if you will, associated with universities, of solid reputation, but that also have spent quite a bit of time online and have a reputation for creating truly fantastic content. So for example, with PGEd, sort of in terms of the interviews that they have, Concord Consortium, the simulations that they have are really well known in terms of quality. And what you have to realize is that being a content partner, being a partner collaborator on LabXChange is not something you just show up and do. There's a vetting process that we go through in terms of really having folks go through the content, review the reputation of those partners, and making sure that they're really solid. So, in the same way that, for example, with the content on HarvardX, with edX. There was a model on edX that big universities, Microsoft, Google, folks that are really focused on the quality of their content, those are the only partners that are available on edX. We took a similar sort of approach where there's really a process of vetting the partners and therefore their content. And so what that means is that these partners stand behind their content. They absolutely stand behind it. And for us, that's really important, because something you have to keep in mind as well, these are really high-end partners, and they want to know that the remixing of their material is being done in terms of what's pulled from the library with equally high quality sort of partners. So there is a certitude or a guarantee from our end of the quality of what's in the LabXChange library.
And I see down the left-hand side there, you've got an Explore by content sources. Am I also able to search Explore by standard, by subject area, by age target, those types of things?
Right. So we are in the process of really sort of enriching what's possible. So when you actually access the library, you can search by keyword, of course, but you can also search by a series of subject areas, by types of content. We're going to be enriching background knowledge. Right now, it's super simple, none, some extensive, but with time as the platform evolves, and by the way, don't forget, we've only been live for a couple months, but as the platform evolves, background knowledge will sort of unpack duration of video, sort of the content source, and by tags that are really popular. But in time, we will be enriching, if you will, the kinds of search facets that are available. So for example, one of the recent ones that we have created is content that focuses on online learning, right? So that if you need guidance, both in terms of how to use LabXChange, but also how it's been used in the context of online learning, that's a new facet that we have just added.
Oh, it looks like Garv is back working now. I think he was muted on our end by accident. Garv, just real quick before you start, after Garv answers Rob's question, I'd like to throw it over to Tom Okaya, if we could unmute him in a second for his question about ecosystems and their potential, a potential way for them to work with this with their constituents. So Garv?
Hi. Sorry about that. A little technical glitch on mine, I guess. But I think Rob's question was about some of the new features that are coming to the platform, and I'm really excited to talk about that because I think we're going to be making a lot of changes that'll help two particular parts of the platform grow really quickly. So on one end, we're adding a lot of social features to the platform. So we're adding things like a global discussion forum, an easier way for mentoring and direct messaging, and we're also adding a way in which in each class, a teacher will be able to assign specific content to an individual student, thus allowing and making personalized and differentiated learning a lot easier. And those should be up within the next 2 or 3 weeks, basically, which I'm really excited about. The other thing we're doing, and I think this resonates with some of the questions that are coming along regarding content that's on our platform, is a big part of the LabXChange ethos is that we fundamentally believe that the challenge of education is a collective challenge and really needs collective action to be able to solve. The problem is just too big for us to take it on. It's a problem that all of us need to take it on. That's obviously well within the STEM ecosystems perspective as well. And so one of the things we've really tried to do from our end is make it easy for different people to be able to contribute content to the platform. And one of the things, and I don't know if I can share my screen. Is that a feature? Yeah. So this, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Looks good.
The features I really wanted to show, because I think this will help, especially large content partners or large ecosystems work really well. We basically created a particular dashboard that allows organizations to be able to control and upload all of their content directly to the platform and do so in a really easy way. I mean, you can almost imagine the settings being kind of like Google Drive. We're giving control to the administrators who can then assign other people the ability to add content to the platform. So all of a sudden, say we're about to launch a partnership with the New England Aquarium, the New England Aquarium can have a team of 15 people adding content to the platform, all managed through their own dashboard right here, without ever needing anybody else to interact with. And because they own all the IP, they can also add and remove content in a way that works for them. So that's one of the the parts of the platform I'm most excited about and will be available soon. So effectively, a partner ends up with a site like this where they can govern all of the content on the platform to help really drive access to their own materials in an easy way through the LabXChange platform, thus allowing our content library to grow. The other great thing about this is that they're also able to track the performance of their content and how it's being used, right? So you might have created some material because you thought people would use it in a biology class, but now all of a sudden you see it remixed in other pathways about bioethics or pathways about engineering, and you really start learning a lot more about the other kind of contexts that people see your content in. And in that way, you start understanding the power of the work you do and the power of the remixability that our platform makes available. So those are a couple of the features that are coming that I'm excited about. I won't talk a little bit about the content because I want Rob to demonstrate some of the experimental design work and some of the simulations we're working on. But there'll be a large set of content around different science pedagogy that's going to be coming on the platform live too in the next month or two.
That sounds great. So I'd like to take 2 questions from our audience, and then I'd love to dig into some of those demos, Rob, if that's okay with you. I think that'll probably bring forth even more questions. So we're going to have, I assume, a lot more questions that we're going to have time to answer. I know your folks are answering some of those in the chat right now, but those that don't get answers, if you're listening, your question doesn't get answered, we can make sure to compile those and get answers back to everyone. Tom, are you with us? This is our first time using Zoom.
Yes, I'm with you. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I think part of my question was, I wanted to see whether, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the questions I was thinking of, I lead the Kenyan ecosystem, where we have quite a number of teachers and schools which participate in our ecosystem. And I was thinking I was wondering whether it is possible to have physics teachers, for instance, join in as a class, then they individually run a class for their students.
So if I'm understanding, Tom, what you're asking is that could you create a class of teachers, of instructors, and then they in turn have their own classes as well?
Yes.
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. So in fact, in my own class, basically what I've done is that I have 5 teaching fellows, and so I actually have a little subclass with the teaching fellows. There's a class with all of the undergraduates. And then each of the teaching fellows for their section have their own little small unit class. And so, yes, because the functionality to be an educator and a learner is in fact available to everyone on the platform, that's a very easy thing to do.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's what I was really interested in. I wanted to inquire that. Thank you very much, Robia.
Yeah, because in some ways, one way to think about this is that we believe in a model where every teacher is a learner and every learner is a teacher.
Correct.
And so what we're trying to create is sort of a network knock-on effect that amplifies, if you will, the possibilities.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. So I'd like to mention, I'd like to also go to Samantha Sharpman from the Marconi Institute for a question. If we could unmute her in just a second. But before we do, I think this is a good opportunity for me to mention the call to action that the STEM Ecosystems Community of Practice is putting forth right now. Remote learning has proven to be a really challenging endeavor throughout our nation. And as we examine these challenges amid COVID-19 and beyond, we're really aiming to build stronger community connections for our schools, our families, our children. So the STEM Learning Ecosystems COP would like to organize and support sustainable change. And we have an opportunity here to recruit school districts across the nation to use the LabXChange platform to provide learning for both students and teachers in STEM. And we'd like to use this free platform to organize a comprehensive professional development communication system for schools. We'd really also like to leverage the platform to build stronger connections among schools, higher education institutions, and community-based organizations. So we will send follow-up to this webinar. I know Veronica has already put a form in the chat, but also stay tuned. If you're an ecosystem or you are a community who is interested in being part of this outlay, please make sure to reach out to us. Over the next several weeks, we'll be putting together a plan to really partner deeply with LabXChange. And I think it's going to be a really exciting opportunity for all of us. So before we go on to Robert's demos, which I'm very excited for, I did see a really great question from Samantha Shartman from the Marconi Institute, and I'm hoping that she is live and can ask that question. Samantha, are you with us?
Hi, Jeremy. I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So my question is, it's more or less, from the perspective of universities who are in the process of developing MOOCs. They're coming up and they're partnering with organizations like lynda.com and Coursera. These things are becoming more and more prevalent. What is the difference between this platform and how those are constructed? And why would I, as a university, choose this platform over the other competitors in the field? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, that's a fantastic question, Samantha.
Is Samantha actually part of your marketing department? That's what I'm wondering. That's a
well,
so set you guys up.
From the perspective of an organization, really depending on what other organization you're looking at, we do tend to have one big advantage, which is we're free. So with most of the MOOC platforms, and as one of the founders of one of them, I can say that we're free. We're more free than any of the others. But there's also something else, which actually, Jeremy, if you'll allow me, let me show you something that in our view is the future of online learning and the next evolutionary step in the MOOC.
I think that's great. While you're pulling that up, I do think your tagline should be Harvard LabXChange, we're more free than the others.
Yes, that's right. We're really free. So this, I have to say, it's something I've wanted to do for a long time. And in LabXChange, we're finally seeing the dream come to fruition. It's what I believe is the future of the course. So it's what we call a cluster. And so, as I mentioned before, with an individual pathway, that's a series of assets that tells a learning story. But in terms of quantity of material, that might be equivalent to what you would use for one class or maybe for a week of class. What we're looking at here now is a cluster called Foundational Concepts and Techniques in Biotechnology that we built in collaboration with the Amgen Biotech Experience. And each of these is a pathway, right? So you click on each one. And here in this pathway, it's focusing on gel electrophoresis. There's the typical pathway: simulation, video, assignment, etc. But if you'll notice when you look at this, there's no numerical order to it. So in time, we will have 30 to 50, actually more like 50 of these hexagons, of these tiles, where each one touches on a specific aspect of a foundational concept and technique in biotechnology. But let's say you need guidance, we have tours. So if you come in and what you need is a basic introduction, you click on that, it renumbers the sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say you don't need an introduction. What you need is to build, how do you build a recombinant plasmid? You click on that one and you get a different sequence. Let's say you're a high school teacher working with the Amgen Biotech Experience and you want something to support Lab 1. You click on that one, Lab 2, Lab 5. And so this is a concept where ultimately the learning is much more adaptive. So imagine, and it's something we'll be working on, a cluster that focuses on the intersection of climate and human health. One can imagine the interdisciplinary tiles in the cluster, which then you could create specific tours going through it that would teach in a very particular way. This is the next evolutionary step of MOOCs. As you might imagine, right now with LabXChange, we're the ones that at the moment control and need to create the clusters manually with partners. But imagine over time, users will start to recommend tours. And in time, the system will start to learn specific popular pathways or tours that folks are creating for themselves based on what they actually want to use it for. So Samantha, in answer to your question, we're the only one that does this, and we're free. So I think that, not to sound competitive or anything, but I really feel the course is over. in my view, this is the future of the course. And like, for example, with the course that I'm teaching now, my hope is that, for example, at the very start of the course, we might start like this, but then as students start to work in groups, I would allow them to differentiate into pathways that might be different. So this will allow us to create much more adaptive sort of learning for our students, both online and, quite frankly, in person as well.
The course is over. I love it. So before you kind of dig into some demos, I do want to call out a question that Sandra Bickerstaff asked, just because I think this is something that's on everyone's minds, but I also think that we have a rare opportunity right now amidst all of the chaos and tragedy that's happening in the world. Sandra is saying, science is treated as a luxury in many parts of South Carolina where I work, referencing the poor past state test scores. How can I market this wonderful tool? And I think that that's a thing that as part of this pilot, we can really dig into through the ecosystems and help you figure out how to market that. But I think the big key is, if we look at the world for the past 3 weeks, it has become very, very apparent that science is no longer, and never was, but science is not a subject that we can be relegating to the free time, to the extra time. It's really, really critical that we have our students engaging with these thoughts and concepts because our kids are the ones who are going to be solving these problems in the future. So we're really, really excited about this partnership from that perspective as well. So Robert, can you share kind of some of the interactive features with us? I'm excited to see these.
Sure, of course. There are 3 of them that I'll focus on. One of the things we've really tried to do is think about new modalities of engaging content. And so we have a kind of interactive that we've created that is based on, and I think a lot of us are really familiar with this, the notion of scrolling, right? So it's a way of having something that is animated and you control it with your flywheel, right? Or with your mouse on your tablet, etc. But what we've found with this approach is that you might argue, well, how is this different from something in QuickTime where you drag the slider back and forth? What we've found working with students is that, in fact, the ability to go back and forth freely, in fact, allows you to explore the content more easily. You can intersperse it with text. You can move through the ideas, if you will, based on text. And so this is a new kind of, it's kind of a variant on animation that we've been finding much more effective. And you can also embed sort of simple simulations with sliders within that. So for us, what we've found is that this kind of interactive really allows us to explore, if you will, new modalities of interacting specifically with processes that we've found can be really compelling for students. So that's relatively simple. We've been building out a number of these. What I think is perhaps more oomphy is that we're really focused on helping students understand the process of science. And the model that we've applied is that there are 2 levels of engaging with the process of science. One is engaging with protocols, with specific methods. And so how do we create simulations that allow students to understand sort of a method like running a protein gel really effectively? And so this is an example of a protocol simulation. And in this case, it's focused on the running of a gel. All of our simulations have multiple levels that you choose from. The way in which we think about the levels is that at level 1, you have never encountered this before. At level 2, you've seen the method before, you know something about it, but you have never done it. At level 3, you might have done it, but now you're applying it in a completely different setting. But for all of our simulations, we have a specific pedagogical arc that is consistent throughout them. Every simulation begins with a context. Then we allow you to go through the various materials, including the equipment that you'll be using. Then, like any good scientist, before you do anything, you need to make predictions related to the method. Then you get to the protocol. You read through the protocol, and what we have done is we have created sort of a very focused environment for doing the actual simulation, where instead of worrying about 3D and all of that, we have taken each component and we've simplified it to its most fundamental features. So like, for example, with a pipetteman, what do you need to worry about? You need to worry about setting it, right? Likewise, with a power supply, what do you need to worry about is the setting of the current and the power on the power supply. You need to open tips, you need to be able to take them on, etc. So we've tried to have a visual pedagogy that, instead of worrying about details, is truly focused on fundamentals. We lead you through the protocol, and at each step of the way, a student can make observations for that specific step, and that will go into a notes sort of function that they have. And then once they've completed the protocol, then they get their results. We haven't done anything, so you don't see the results, but you would have had the predicted results from your predictions, and then you would see your actual results. And then, like any true sort of scenario, you need to reflect on what you've done. And then the system summarizes what happens. So that this is a simulation focused on the protocol, but it's in the context of a pedagogical arc where you understand your context, the materials, you make predictions, you execute the protocol, see your results, and you're critical of them, and then you reflect on what you did. So this is, in my view, a new generation of simulation, and something that I think is important to realize. Quite often in lab simulations, folks go crazy on very complicated things that are also very difficult to load. Everything you're seeing here is in HTML5. This loads beautifully in any website, on any web browser. It loads on a tablet very easily. It's extremely lightweight. So what that means is that you can have a real simulation experience without something that is incredibly sort of bandwidth intensive. And for us, that's hugely important. And then the third thing that I'll share, and this is something we're super excited about, is the next level of the process of science, which is not just protocols, but experimental design. As most of us know, it's very rare that a single protocol is in fact a full-bodied experiment. Usually you need to have several protocols, several experiments that go together if you're going to answer a question. So this is a meta level of the scientific process where students, instead of obsessing on just getting one protocol right, need to understand a protocol well enough to figure out how it would be used in a context of several steps to answer a question. So in this simulation, you need to design how you will identify single nucleotide polymorphisms. So in this simulation, once again, we have levels. And in level 1, we set the context as before. What is a SNP, so on and so forth. Now, instead of materials and equipment, we tell you about techniques. We'll remind you what each of these techniques are. And in time, we will have simulations that address each and every one of these techniques. Then you go into design. Now, because, oh, someone's scribbling here. I'm not sure what that is. But in any case, that red scribble is actually not on the site. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Maybe that was me. Anyway, so the way this works is that because okay, someone is scribbling. Okay, who's scribbling? If they could wipe.
About Zoom, and apparently we have settings turned on.
Yes, and I see someone's going crazy, scribbling red.
So while we're figuring that out, or if you go to another one, can you tell us, Rob, how many of these labs are currently available, or Garv, and what's on the roadmap for the next 6 months to a year for additional labs?
So in terms of the experimental design simulations, we have one of them live right now. We're in the process of building another 3. Garv, I can't remember how many we have on the roadmap. Oh, you're still muted. Okay, Garv is muted and can't unmute. In terms of what we have on the platform now with the protocol simulations, I think we have 8. They're going to be quite okay, Garv, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sorry, before some scary things are said. We currently have 6 protocol simulations live on the platform.
Thousands.
And next Tuesday.
Yeah, sorry, just had to make sure I know. Now I know who's muting me in this. By my guess is by end of this year, certainly by next year, we'll have close to 40 to 50 scrollables, about 30 protocol simulations, and about 20 or 30 experimental designs. The way we're running now, we just have an incredible team, and they make Rob and I look good.
I'm gonna totally put you on the spot inappropriately and say that this partnership that we're talking about, the ecosystems, would probably be a great opportunity for LabXChange to have some field testing of in-process labs.
Oh, completely.
Because I'm sure that our folks would love to have early access in order to give you that feedback. So just to get that kind of on your radar. So we're about to run out of time, and I've got a couple things I want to talk about at the end. So I'd like to ask the two of you, if you could, just to give us some closing thoughts. What do you see as next for the tool, for this partnership, for teaching and learning online? Where do you see the next several months heading, and what are you excited about?
Well, so I mean, as Garth pointed out, we have a significant roadmap ahead of us in terms of the materials that we're hoping to build. But I think for us, a critical part of this is that we are a community platform. And with instructors, with scientists out there, come on down if you want to work with us in terms of the content that we're building, if you want to think about pathways, clusters that you think would be incredibly powerful and useful, in terms of the groups that you're already working in. We really want to work with groups and with collaborators that can help us build and that can help us really create more material, more approaches for the platform. There's even, because by the way, we've just scratched the surface. We have case studies, we have narratives that give scientists from a diversity of backgrounds voice in terms of sharing their stories. There's a lot of ways in which you can engage with us. And so for us, what's so exciting about sort of the STEM ecosystem sort of family is what you represent in terms of a network that we can really work with in exciting ways.
Sure. I think Rob said a lot of what I was going to say. So maybe I'll just talk about a little bit of a different part, which is that ultimately we think that for this tool to be, it's a tool, and how effective the tool is going to be is going to depend on how it meets the needs of the people who are on the front lines. And one of the things we really tried to pride ourselves with the initial development is that every part of the platform was developed with a set of teachers. So teachers were constantly giving us feedback in every part of the design. And I can promise you the way the platform looks now looks nothing like when Rob and I were initially thinking about it a year and a half ago. We learned quite quickly that what we think is good is very different from what teachers think is good. And I want to keep that going. I think it's really important first for you to give us feedback of what are the parts of the platform we should be doubling down on, what are the parts of the platform that aren't meeting your needs, and make that available to us through whatever channels you can, because ultimately for this to be successful, and we really hope it is, we want this to be a tool that you'll actually use, and the only way you're going to do that if it actually meets your needs. So please talk to us. Please let us know what we should be doing better.
Thank you so much, both of you. You know, we joked a lot about this being free. There's a very big difference between free because it's garbage and free because of supportive organizations like Harvard and the Amgen Foundation. This is not the former. This is the latter. This is a really, really incredible tool. As I mentioned before, the STEM learning ecosystems are working on a new partnership, and we have a call to action that we are asking you that if you are interested in being part of this pilot, if you're interested in bringing your communities together to learn more, to implement this tool, and to give feedback into the growth and expansion of Harvard LabXChange, please make sure that you fill out that form that Veronica sent out, and it'll be sent to you in other ways as well. Rob, Garv, thank you so much. We really appreciate you guys joining us today.
Our pleasure.
This has been a production of the STEM at Home initiative of the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice. Conversations like these will be happening weekly and can be found on stemecosystems.org. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Garv. I'm Jeremy Shore, and thank you for joining us.